Welcome back to another episode of the Back Pocket Creative. Thankful for you listening. Thankful for all the support. Once again, I'll continue to always say that. I'm very thankful for anybody out there listening, sharing, watching, whatever it is. I'm very appreciative. So this week, I have been really discussing this topic with a couple different people a lot lately. And it's something that actually I'll be talking on the CA podcast very soon with Lance, is expectations. So we'll be tackling a little bit of a different side of things, and our discussion is probably going to go a lot deeper into this topic in a lot of different areas and arenas. But the way I want to do it is more from a creative perspective when working on a project, working with someone, working in any kind of area where you're doing a project and you're either doing a project for someone or you're in charge of it, but there's someone above you, or there's an expectation of this is what it should be. And what I've found myself in is a lot of problems where I do everything right that I know, and there's an expectation somewhere and I didn't meet that expectation. And then sometimes it's addressed and it's like, okay, well, I didn't know, or like whatever. Or sometimes, and this is the worst part, where something happens, project's delivered, expectation wasn't delivered, and it's never talked about. And then another project comes up, you do it, and the expectations aren't met again. And then it's not talked about. And then it finally boils into a big thing, and it's like, you should have been doing this, and we expect you to do this, and this is the thing. And it was never communicated, never talked about, never communicated, nothing. Or it was lost in translation. It was something where, because this is the thing I've had a lot, is there will be an idea, right, for a project. And the project's goal will be to do X, Y, and Z. And so there's an initial concept that's brought to us, and you say, okay, this is the way we're going to do it. And then as time goes on, we're like, you know what, there's a better way to do it. And as you find the better way to do it, you say, okay, well, there's a better way to do it. It's quicker, it's faster, time efficient. All right, let's do it. And then there's something in transition between what was expected of the first idea and the second idea, doesn't get executed in the second idea. And there's a big blow up. Why did this happen? Why didn't this get added? This should have been there. This shouldn't have been there. And what happens is because there wasn't thorough communication, that got slipped through the cracks. And it's on me. If I'm the project lead or whatever, I have to take responsibility. And, because I can and I have before. So, it's not my fault. Like, it wasn't fully communicated or whatever. But then, because I took the liberty to change something, or I took the liberty to make it better, and which it may have been, I didn't fully communicate that to the people that I was making the project for, or my boss, right? And so I think a lot of times in the creative space, especially when you're working full-time for people, or even contract work, stipend work, anything like that, and even for clients where it's just a peer-to-peer, you're just creating for someone that paid you to do something. Sometimes expectations can be high on one side or the other, or both, and it can create a meltdown because, I've gone through things recently where, because I didn't fully communicate something, I lost time, because now I had to go back, do a whole bunch of stuff, when had I just asked the right questions, I could have got the answers. Now, the way to look at it is, they should tell you. And in a lot of situations, yes, absolutely. The leadership above you, the people paying you to do things, should communicate it to you. Duh. But at the end of the day, you want to get paid, you want to do this thing, you want to become a master at your craft. You know what? You have to remove all the excuses. And that's something I learned. I have to remove the excuse of not knowing. I have to remove the excuse, because a lot of times, it's just if they didn't tell me, I can get a little workaround, hey, they didn't tell me that. So, although I know this might need to happen, they didn't say it. And so I use that as a workaround. And I found very quickly that's the wrong way to do things. And, and I think the other thing too is it's in the moment, especially if something's ongoing. One thing I learned, and it's something that I was not good at early in my career, is if something happened and it was clearly the person above me's fault, instead of just getting it done, fixing it, I would go to war against said person, because I would pull all the receipts. I would pull all the conversations, all the emails, and be like, hey, you didn't say jack crap about this. And all the while, it still had to get done. I was putting so much effort into showing how right I was that now I became the one that was wrong. And so I realized I had to change. I had to understand that expectations set that weren't told to me sometimes were just going to happen. And the best way to expose that sometimes is to ask all the questions. And so that's why I have a lot of people that'll come to me and they'll ask me like, hey, what do you think I should do for this? And I'm like, ask them this, this, and this, and this. Like, if you've never had a job in a certain field, or in your field, you've never done a certain thing. Like if you're a videographer and you've never done a specific type of videography, ask somebody that you know, or go to Google and find out what it entails for that type of work. And then ask all those questions, because the worst feeling is getting to a client, doing something, and them going, well, where's this? And you're like, what? What do you mean? Or like, hey, they wanted it done 12 hours after shooting. And you're like, hold on, I have life. I wouldn't have said yes to this if I knew that you needed it right then and there. And so it becomes this battle of expectations. And that for me, when I was young, it was very much not a battle of expectations. It was a battle of who was right and who was wrong. And what I found out very quickly is, as the person doing the project, you're never right. It's always the people above you. It's always the person that you're answering to. It's always who you're submitting the project to. That's who's right. You can be as right on paper as you want to be. Now, you want to do contracts, especially with weddings and stuff like that. That's the best thing to do, because if you can do contract work where you can lay out things and you can lay out revisions and you can lay out what they want and you can bind them to a contract, go ahead. That's the best thing to do in that industry. But as a lot of people know, in different side businesses and things, it is tough to drop contracts. If you're able to, do it. Absolutely drop contracts, make them commit to something, and then when they come back to you, charge them for coming back to you and not communicating in the first place. I mean, because when I was younger, I had a job where there were some projects that were being done, and it was very much not a part of my day job, but it was something I was required to do and required to work with a subset of people. And to be quite frank, these people were extremely unorganized. These people were not fun to work with. These people did not respect boundaries. These people would threaten to get you fired if they didn't get their way. These people were, I could go on, very rude. Thankful I no longer work with them or really have to do anything professionally with them, because they were awful to work with. And I'm glad that I don't have to have anything to do with people like them again, because I can choose now what I want to do. Thankfully, I'm in a position where I can choose not to work with those people and those types of people. But these people, they would say they wanted one thing. We would shoot one thing. And we put a lot of work into it. And actually, it would be after hours. And no, I didn't get paid overtime for it, but I was required to do it. And so I did it. And, the first 2 times I would say I had a good heart doing it. I didn't really know the people the way I learned more and more about them and the way they operated, and that they were very manipulative and they were very much friends with you until they were no longer friends with you, and then they would cut your throat. And so what I realized is I could put all the work into doing what they told me to do, and then they would absolutely change it at the end. I could do everything in my absolute power to communicate, to explain problems with their idea. Hey, this may not happen because of this, that, and the other. And their solution was just to throw me under the bus and try to get me fired. And thankfully, they didn't have the power they thought they did, and I did get fired. But I had to sadly trust that I did everything I humanly could to deal with unreasonable people. And I had to, at the end of the day, stand up for myself. But the way I did it was I showed proof that I went through everything. I broke my back communicating. I delivered when it was asked, the whole 9. The expectations were changed, but they were changed maliciously. And I was able to get out of that situation. And that situation, now, I responded differently after I responded bad the first 2 times. So the third time, I finally realized I need to become completely and utterly blameless in this, and I need to do my best part. So I say that to say that sometimes it's not applicable to necessarily assume everything on yourself. So when I'm saying, hey, you're always wrong. The reason that you assume that you're always wrong and that you always try to take the thing of the client's always right is simply because if you do everything in your power to make yourself right in the sense of communication, in the sense of execution, then if someone comes to you and it is a fight, you're able to present a situation where it's like, hey, we had this conversation. There was this correspondence. There was this email, if it comes down to that. But the way that I'm saying is I realized that I was doing that in everyday situations. I was very much being petty sometimes. And so I had to catch myself from that. So what I'm not saying is to not fight things that definitely weren't your fault. But what I am saying is change how you fight, change what you fight, and manage your own expectations. You have to manage your own expectations of the people you're working with. So what I mean by that is these people that I was referring to, they were unreasonable. So me expecting them to like what I did or to even just shut up and take it, and just take the product, my expectations were very far off. And it wasn't till the third time where I was like, I expect absolutely to be crushed by these people. So I'm going to make sure I record every conversation. I get them to email or text me everything they asked of me. And I'm going to make sure I do my part and I deliver everything they're asking. So when the conversation comes back around and they lose their minds and they change everything, and when I say everything, literally want to refilm the entire project because they got a better idea after the final product was delivered to them and they want to do something completely different. And I was able to make sure that I was in the right. But then I realized I was able to treat that situation uniquely without it allowing that situation to affect other people. And I didn't run other people ragged with, no, you said this. It was like, no, it was a simple miscommunication. I didn't ask enough, and I'd do it. Because previously, like I said, that would be the issue where it would be like, man, this is nuts. And that was the first interaction I had with those people was what triggered my, I'm right, you're wrong, very hard in everything. So then I began to treat everything because I felt like everyone was out to get me, and it wasn't. It was just these specific people. And so I say all of that and even bringing that story up just to say, make sure when you're setting expectations and you're having expectations your own and you're working with other people, because the other side that I'm not really mentioning is the expectations of your peers, the people that you're working alongside of, the people that you're doing projects with. Make sure there's expectations of what their role is. Make sure that you're not overstepping. And if you do overstep, make sure there was an expectation in the beginning that, hey, I am going to potentially take over here to mitigate this. Especially if you're a lead role, just make sure you communicate to your team. Make sure you communicate to everybody. I think the base of what I'm saying is expectations is communication. That's all it is. It's just communicating. The reoccurring theme always for me where I realize I have to make a phone call is when I hear one thing from somebody and one thing from somebody else and about a project. And then I'm like, okay, so I didn't hear that and I didn't hear that. So you know what I need to do? I need to call the person that's over it. And then how do they want to handle it? What do they want to say? Do I need to go to these people? Or are they going to go to those people and make the communication? But expectations and everything is so important. It's so important in our daily life. And like I said, me and Lance are going to discuss a little bit further on the CA podcast soon about expectations, not what we're talking about, but outside of this kind of realm. And they're just important. It's important to set expectations everywhere, but especially when you're working with people on projects. And I mean, most certainly, if you're in a day-to-day job or any kind of contract where you're working with the same people, man, your communication has to be on point, because the only way you're going to keep a good relationship is by communication and setting expectations. I mean, the thing is like I have had horrible experiences with my bosses not having their expectations of me after a while known to me. They're wanting certain things, never communicated. And what it does is it creates friction. And so that's all today's episode is. Hope that you enjoyed. Hope that you gleaned something from it in my rambling and in my crazy story. And yeah, hope you join me next week. See ya.